All right. Well, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Chad Butler. I work here at GBS Retire with Rocky Pratt, who's going to be presenting today. Rocky is our resident Social Security expert and certified financial planner. So I know this is a topic that we all hear a lot of misinformation on. We all hear from friends that say it's not going to be around anymore, to people saying that you need to claim it at 62 or that you should wait till 70. And I am here today to, or we, I should say, we are here today to kind of clean that all up and hope all are a little bit more familiar with Social Security at the end of it. And if you have questions, please put them into the chat and I will pause Rocky or answer those at the end of the session today. So for that, with all of that said, I'm going to turn it over to Rocky. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. Yeah, we're excited to be here today, like Chad said, to talk about this topic, which I know is top of mind for a lot of people nowadays, regardless of whether you're close to retirement in the next few years or if you're like me in 20, 30 plus years away from retirement. So hopefully, regardless of where you sit in relation to retirement, we'll go over some good information for you to keep in mind. There's a lot of information around Social Security, so kind of struggled finding just the specific topics and things to go over to cram it into just our 30-minute session here today. So it'll be fairly high level on all these things that we go through, as is typical of our monthly webinars here. So feel free to drop more specific questions in the Q&A like Chad said, or we can always schedule a meeting afterwards. I'll make sure you have that information for how to schedule an appointment with us and our contact information at the end. We'll go through a couple different things that I think are top of mind around Social Security, particularly the current state of the Social Security's trust. How long can that continue to pay out, etc. How to qualify for benefits. That's an important question in terms of maximizing your Social Security benefit, as well as some other strategies to optimize Social Security, and then make sure you have at least some basic knowledge around some of the auxiliary benefits around Social Security that for some of you may apply at some point. First of all, I want to have a quick quiz question here. So let me pull up my poll. Hopefully you're seeing that. When is the Social Security trust expected to be depleted? So when will the trust fund run out, so to speak? There's a lot of talking heads out there throwing around different years, doomsday, so to speak, around when Social Security trust will be depleted. We're getting a lot of B's and C's. I like it. Awesome. Just for sake of time, we're just going to dive right into it. So the correct answer, if we looked at it last year, was C of 2035. Fast forward to this year, now experts are projecting that the trust fund will be depleted by 2034. So 2034, at least at this year, based on the current numbers, if we look next year, that could change. So if we're looking at Social Security and specifically the trust fund, what we're looking at is the reserves that the trust fund has in place. Originally, Social Security was never meant to have any sort of reserves anyway, so the fact that we have some reserves has actually just been a bonus. But if we're looking at what to expect over the next few years and how the trust fund is being quote unquote depleted, it's important to look at the financing of how Social Security trust operates, looking in terms of the income versus expenses, right? If we're looking back at our own budget, right, to make sure that we aren't facing insolvency in our own financial health, it's important to look at where our income is coming from and where our expenses are going, as we all know. Also, as we know, it can be very difficult sometimes for the federal government to have a budget in place. And we often see that with Social Security as well. So with Social Security, you can see how it's funded. The revenue includes mostly payroll taxes, right? So if we look at our W-2 or the tax forms, we'll see payroll taxes, sometimes called FICA taxes, about 6.2% from us and 6.2% from our employer. That is essentially the main funding source of Social Security. You'll see a little bit from the taxation of benefits of current active retiree benefits, and then also 5% or so from interest on those reserves or the trust fund. Now, if we look at the expenses, it's all obviously retirement benefits or other types of benefits paid out by Social Security. But you can see, at least in 2023, the difference between what was coming in versus what was going out, right? It's not, so to speak, a balanced budget. There's more going out of the trust funding those benefits than there is coming in, mainly with those payroll taxes. So what does that mean, right? If we look back at our budget, if we're spending more than we are bringing in, we are going to be depleting our savings account. Once our savings account gets to zero, what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to match our expenses with what's coming in from our income. So that's essentially what's going to happen around 2034, 2035, if there are no changes to the Social Security system. Now, there will be some changes, right? But worst case scenario, if there are no changes, then the benefits, what's paid out of the trust, will have to be reduced to match what is coming in. So that's kind of worst case scenario, but we do expect there to be lots of changes around Social Security in the next 10 years or so. It's typical of any administration to kick the can down the road. So it probably won't be this administration, but maybe the next that addresses the issue around Social Security. But if we look back to the 80s, Social Security Trust was facing a similar insolvency situation, very similar to what we will probably see in the next few years. There were some changes made to Social Security system. The payroll taxes increased. Full retirement age was delayed from 65 to what is now, for most of us, full retirement age of 67. And the changes were only meant to be a patch, right? They knew at some point they were going to have to readdress this. It's come a little bit faster than expected, but it was expected to have to readdress some of these issues around Social Security. So there will be some changes, whether that's to payroll taxes, adjustment of full retirement age. There's going to be some changes to make sure that it is able to continue to pay out. Worst case scenario, and sometimes when we're doing our financial planning for clients that are a bit closer to retirement, we often look at a worst case scenario, kind of stress test the retirement plan, so to speak. And worst case scenario, if there are no changes, benefits will have to be reduced to about 79 to 80% of expected payout. But that's actually able to continue to pay out until the 2090s at least. So there's no real risk around the bulk of the benefits that Social Security is going to be able to pay out. And it always ebbs and flows, right? The current workforce is paying into the trust to fund current retirees. That's all that the Social Security system was meant to do. And based on the size of the generations, that's always going to change year to year. So there will be some changes to Social Security. We'll keep an eye on that. Of course, probably do more of these meetings around those changes when that gets closer. But just know that at least for your expected benefits, it's a very high probability that you'll be able to be fairly confident in those benefit estimates that you may get from Social Security or some of those other calculators out there. So how do we qualify for benefits? I want to take just a couple minutes to make sure we understand how we can qualify for our Social Security benefit, to make sure we're able to prepare now to make sure we get that maximum benefit that we can. Eligibility for Social Security is based on credits. So you essentially earn 1 credit for a quarter of the year that you earn at least $1,800 in this year, 1810. Max of 4 credits per year. And so to reach the full 40 credits that you need to fully qualify for Social Security, it's about 10 years or so of working, paying those payroll, those FICA taxes, paying into the Social Security Trust. Now, you may also be eligible for Social Security based on a current or former spouse's work. So I'll talk more about spousal benefits here in a minute, but if your spouse has 40 full credits with Social Security, then you may also qualify for a spousal benefit based on their record. So it's fairly easy to qualify for Social Security, only need about 10 years or so of working and paying in those FICA taxes. What they do in terms of calculating your retirement benefit, I'm going to cover this at a very high level. You can look more into detail on this if you want at another time, but essentially they take your 35 highest years of eligible income. So income that you've been paying, those payroll, Social Security taxes, take the highest 35 years, index it for inflation. So you get, and they find an averaged monthly income index for inflation. They then take that average monthly income number and apply it to their formula to calculate the PIA. That just stands for primary insurance amount, or essentially your monthly payment from Social Security at full retirement age. So you can see you get 90% replacement up to that first bend point, which is about $1,174 for this year, and then 32% and 15%, so on. So what that shows us is for lower income earners, they can expect significantly more replacement of their income from Social Security. Higher income earners shouldn't expect that much in terms of percentage of their income being replaced by Social Security. So if you imagine $1,000 a month, maybe $12,000 or so a year, if that's what you made each year from your income, then you could have about 90% of that income replaced from Social Security. On the flip side, a high income earner, let's say someone making $1 million a year throughout their career, they would have the max Social Security amount, which this year is about 4,000, so about 48,000, which would only be about 45% for 25, not 45, 425% replacement of their income from Social Security. So it definitely favors lower income earners in terms of replacement of income in retirement. But that 35 years was one of the more important things to remember, is that the longer you work, past that 10 years, that is the minimum of 10 years to qualify for Social Security, the longer you work, potentially the more you are able to get. If you notice in this example chart here, there are some zeros. So any years where you may have zeros does draw down your average monthly income. So it will potentially reduce your benefit slightly if there are any zeros in your work history. Now, I did want to do a quick plug on the recent Social Security Fairness Act, because it does help in terms of qualification for Social Security benefits for some of you. I know there are a number of you either online today or watching the recording that work for an employer that may have opted out of Social Security. So sometimes an employer, particularly a government entity, can choose to opt out of Social Security and therefore not pay into the Social Security Trust, as well as any employees working for the organization. Previously, if that employer offered a pension, which essentially would be a government pension at that point, then there are certain provisions in Social Security that would prevent the employees from receiving Social Security, either on their record or their spouse's record. That's what was called the windfall elimination provision, or the government pension offset. Essentially, the Social Security Fairness Act that was just passed by the Biden administration repealed both WEP and GPO provisions, which means it's increasing Social Security benefits for millions of people, which is a good benefit. I think there's a lot of issues with GPO and the WEP provisions. So I think personally it's a good thing to have that repealed, opening benefits for a lot of individuals. Now, for many of you that doesn't apply, but if it does and you want to go more into detail about that, let us know and we can happily help you see how that affects your overall planning situation. Now, in terms of maximizing your Social Security benefit, I want to spend really the bulk of the rest of our time on this to make sure you are able to get your full benefit and be planning now for when that time comes, when you have the option to file for Social Security. The number one there, we already talked about working the full 35 years. Like I mentioned, if there's any zeros in there that would draw down your average monthly income slightly, that they then apply to the formula. So working the full 35 years is important. Number two is fairly close to that, where if you scale back work or have semi-retirement, so to speak, closer to your retirement age, then those years where you may be making less than previously could also bring down the average slightly. Now, that's not to say you need to work the full 35 years, or that's not to say you shouldn't retire early or have semi-retirement if that fits within your plan and priorities. It's just something to keep in mind and make sure you're aware of when running your projections. Number three there, delaying benefits is really the best way to increase your monthly benefit from Social Security, particularly from full retirement age to 70. So Chad mentioned taking Social Security from 62 versus waiting until 70. Each year you delay your Social Security benefit, the larger it gets, particularly between 67 and 70. It'll increase by 8% each year, plus any cost of living adjustment that may be applied from inflation that year. So that's really the best way to increase your monthly income from Social Security. Social Security tax is another big one. Avoiding that Social Security tax as much as possible to really save and maximize your Social Security benefit is important. Up to 85% of your Social Security income, under the current system at least, may be taxable. It's all dependent on your total income that year. So that is a big argument in favor of Roth contributions. Now, we don't have too much time to go into Roth versus pre-tax today. We'll likely do that in a future webinar. But Roth, as a reminder, you can take out of your Roth accounts tax-free in retirement. If you take out of a pre-tax account, that means you're paying taxes on it when you take it out. That is going to increase your overall income for the year and may push your Social Security into a taxable threshold. Roth does not affect that. So for many of you, Social Security may not be taxable at all unless you have additional income coming in. So if you pair Social Security, maybe a little bit from pre-tax accounts, and then the rest from Roth, that can significantly reduce your overall taxes around Social Security. Now we're just looking at, a siloed view of Social Security and Roth contributions, not looking at the other factors to consider, but that is a big pro for the Roth argument. It allows for a lot of flexibility in retirement around taxes. Then the last one there, if you start taking Social Security early, before full retirement age, say 62, 64, 65, and you're still working, your income may reduce your Social Security benefit for that year at least. It's not permanent. It will be readjusted once you reach full retirement age. But typically, if you're working, you should wait and hold off on Social Security in most cases until you are closer to retirement. So hopefully that makes sense. When we come back to when to file for Social Security, like you mentioned, you have the option between 62 and 70. So when it comes to maximizing the benefit, this is largely what the question becomes. When should I take Social Security? The longer I wait, the longer I work, the more we'll get, right? In some cases, ultimately, and when people come to us and ask, when should I take Social Security? When should I file for Social Security to make sure I'm getting the absolute most pennies that I can from Social Security Administration? I always ask them, well, how long are you going to live? Our life expectancy largely determines when we should file Social Security in order to get the maximum amount total possible. But we don't know when that's going to be, right? That's a big question mark, a big uncertainty around how long we're going to live. And so a lot of times we just don't know. But you can see the break-even point there in terms of this simple chart, in terms of taking it at 62, 67, or 70. And we see the ultimate break-even point is about 83. If you are going to live longer than 83 years old, then in terms of getting the most amount from Social Security, you should wait until you are 70. But again, that doesn't tell the whole story, right? If you're retiring a little bit earlier, 64, 65, what have you, there's a number of years where you're going to have to make up that income from other sources. Plus, I always ask this question, would you rather have more money between 62 and 72, or would you rather have more money between 72 and whenever you might pass away, which we ultimately never know? A lot of times it makes sense to take it a little bit earlier, have more money when you're younger, healthier, actually able to enjoy it, versus having more when you're older. Now, that said, some of us we may not have that much in our retirement accounts. Therefore, we need to have the most possible that we can get from Social Security. And in those cases, of course, it makes sense to maybe continue to work, let that Social Security increase. And then once it's at a point where it can replace those expenses and replace your income, then you can get on Social Security. So there's a lot of different factors that go into play. Ultimately, the big question comes to how long are you going to live? All right, so a couple different strategies that I want to go through really quick. There was a couple previously, like the file and suspend strategy. The Social Security Administration and the government had gotten fairly strict in terms of cracking down on some of those loopholes, closing those, but there are still a couple to keep in mind. Delaying one or both until 70 is a great option to increase your benefit, and I'll show you kind of numbers-wise here next what these strategies look like. Age staggering. So if you and your spouse both qualify for your own benefit, you can kind of stagger that and compare your benefit versus spousal benefit to find the optimal strategy for you. And then Roth distributions, I already mentioned that. That is a big one in terms of saving on taxes. I think it's one of the biggest strategies you can use today in preparation to help maximize your Social Security in the future. So the delaying strategy, where you delay it as long as possible. There's no need to delay it past 70. You don't get any benefit from delaying it past 70. So if you're getting close to 70, once you hit 70, you need to take it right away. But if you can delay it a few years, we can see from this chart the impact that it has on your overall Social Security. Right. So in this example, John and Jane make a similar income and expect a similar amount from Social Security. We see the blue line. That's where they both start taking it at 62. I guess we're assuming they're retiring at 62. You can see that income throughout their life. The green line, that is where they wait until age 70 to start taking Social Security benefits. And we can see the impact. This is assuming, I think, John lives to 85, Jane lives to 87. So again, life expectancy is a big factor here. But if that's the case, you can see if they choose to wait, cumulatively, they would receive almost $400,000 more from Social Security over their lifetimes. So depending on their situation, it may be best to wait to receive more later in their lifetime. In terms of an age staggering strategy, sometimes I like this if you and your spouse both work and can both file based on your own work history. So in this example, we see the blue line where John and Jane both file at 67 at their full retirement age. And we can see in this example, it makes more sense because John is a higher income earner for John to take his benefit and for Jane to take the spousal benefit, which would be 50% of John's in that scenario. But let's say instead their goal, and again, a lot of it comes back to your goals and priorities. In this example, their goal was to leave Jane with as much money as they can to help fund her after John passes away. I've met a lot of people that is their main concern. Once John, the higher income earner, passes away, they will lose some income because now Jane will not receive both her benefit and the spouse benefit, just the higher amount. So the better solution in their situation would be for John to wait until 70, for Jane to start taking her benefit as soon as she can at 67 or whenever they retire. And then once John files for the Social Security benefit, then Jane can switch to the spousal benefit, which may be higher than hers, depending on her work history. And then you see at 85, when John passes away, then Jane can switch to the spousal benefit, which would be, or the survivor benefit, excuse me, which would then be John's full monthly benefit from Social Security. So there's a lot of different strategies. A lot of it does come down to your goals and priorities, both in retirement and after life for one of you. So if you want to go into your specific situation, we can actually run this chart individually for you as well to see what may make the most sense. Just lastly, there's a couple auxiliary benefits that I do like to highlight around Social Security. Some of these may not apply to you right now, but it's important to understand that they do exist in the event that something does happen in the future. Spousal benefits, I already mentioned. As a spouse, if your spouse has 40 credits of work history, like I said, you could qualify for Social Security benefits based on their work history. Now, that would either be your full benefit based on your work history or 50% of their benefit. So if your spouse's benefit is expected to be $3,000 a month, then you could get $1,500 a month as a spousal benefit, even if your benefit under your work history is only, say, $1,000 a month. That is a spousal benefit that is available. Also, a similar benefit if you are divorced. So you can still get the spousal benefit based on your ex-spouse's record. But you have to have been married for at least 10 years and you can't be remarried to someone else. If you get remarried, then you are considered a spouse and can only receive spousal benefits on the new spouse's work history. And of course, you have to be 62, so most rules still apply regarding spousal benefits as regular Social Security benefits. The other one to keep in mind that hopefully none of you have to go through at this time is the survivor benefit. So a survivor benefit is when a primary income earner, someone who has fully qualified for Social Security with at least 40 credits, passes away with dependents still alive. So those dependents may be eligible for additional benefits. You can see those there. Spouse who is under age 60, who cares for a minor, someone under 16, can receive some Social Security benefit, essentially to help care for that child. The child can also earn, in addition to that, an additional benefit until the age of 18. So really the point of that is just to get the spouse and the children up to a point where they can then work and cover their expenses that way. So it serves as a little bit of a form of life insurance, but is no means a replacement for traditional term life insurance or income protection. And the last one I wanted to go through is the disability or other auxiliary benefits like that. Disability is an important one. I've talked with a lot of individuals who did not know that their child or someone that they're in their family might qualify for disability benefits. In most cases, in terms of getting disability benefits for yourself, you do have to be fully qualified, 40 credits of Social Security, and then as you see there, that definition of disability, not able to provide substantial gainful activity, about $1,500 this year. But the important thing I'd like to remind people about with this one is with children with disability, that you may be able to qualify for some additional Social Security benefits for those children who may be disabled or may become disabled even into adulthood. So that's an important one to keep an eye on. Hopefully it doesn't apply to anyone here or in the future, but important one to keep an eye on just in case. All right, so I know I went through a lot. We have a few minutes, so happy to go through some individual questions as well. But just want to remind everyone that we do have a number of retirement planning, financial planning tools that we can run through, whether it's really more comprehensive or more surface level, to help you review and analyze your Social Security strategy or any other questions that you have. You can always reach out to us. You can scan that QR code to schedule a free consultation with us. These meetings are always free. We're happy to provide that resource. And then keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars as well. You can always reach out to us via email or phone number as part of being engaged with GBS through your employer. We are a resource for you. But happy now, Chad, if there are any questions to address.
Let me see here. No main questions as of right now. However, I do have a few emailed questions that came in previously. Oh, never mind. I have a couple here. So the question is, if I don't have 35 years of work history, zero earning years, zero earning years will bring down your potential Social Security paid out amount. But what if you have over 35 years of work history and then don't work a few years before claiming Social Security? So essentially, let's say, Rocky, you and I do 20 years, we're nowhere near retirement, we stop working. What happens to the benefit?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And those years where you earn zero will draw down your average monthly income, which is then applied to the formula. But if you work the full 35 years and then stop and then wait to take Social Security, which I think is maybe what the question was going at, then those 0 years will not draw down your average because you have 35 full years. But the only downside there is typically later in your career, you're making more, higher income, higher earning years will increase your average. So it's just an opportunity cost maybe that you're missing out on there. That is a great question.
Excellent. All right, couple question here, and I think this has to do more with the windfall elimination, but someone said if they work a majority of years paying into Social Security, but they do have a small government pension, will Social Security still be paid since they have a small government pension, even if it's a small one?
Great question. And because of that Social Security Fairness Act, it actually doesn't matter. So you'll still receive both the government pension plus the Social Security. Previously, your government pension would have reduced your Social Security slightly, but it doesn't matter at this point. Going forward, you will receive both.
Okay, awesome. Great. Someone had a question about showing the QR code again, and I think this is the one that we had earlier as well, right, Rocky?
Yes, so these are the same QR codes you can use to scan either one.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think you were able to take care of most of the questions. Just looking here, and there's one that was emailed to me again. This was previous to us starting the webinar, and it goes around taxation. I know you talked about it a little bit, but they're talking about eliminating Social Security taxes in the bill that's coming up. I don't know a whole lot about it, but they are wondering, are there Social Security taxes going to be taxed? And if so, is there like a limit?
Great question. And so in regards to Social Security taxation, there have been a lot of pushback around that, trying to get Social Security taxes eliminated. But at least in this type of a bill, it's being pushed through or trying to be pushed through. Eliminating Social Security tax is not on there. There are some people saying that it is, but the only thing that's in there around Social Security taxes, so to speak, is more of a tax credit for retirees to help offset that tax credit. But at least currently, there are no plans in place that I'm aware of to fully eliminate Social Security taxes, because it would require a different bill with more of a majority than could be currently reached. At least that is the current consensus.
Okay. Very good. Last question here on disability. Sorry, two questions. Disability benefits. If someone is custodian of a child, but maybe not direct DNA link to the child, would they still qualify for the disability child benefits?
Great question. And that I would probably say maybe reach out and we can go more into detail on that. I would say generally speaking, yes, as long as it is a dependent of you under your custody, then typically, yes, they would be able to apply based on the parents' work history. But it is case by case. And one thing also on that with disability, most of the time when people apply for it and try and get on that disability for their disabled, either themselves or their children, oftentimes they get rejected the first time or two. And so if you have tried and got rejected, or if you do get rejected, be patient, keep trying. A lot of times you can come at it at a different angle and be approved, even if you've been rejected.
Awesome. One question actually that I personally had with someone that had called in a couple days ago, and I was wondering, Rocky, if you might know this, but if someone has a VA disability pension from the military, does that automatically qualify them for Social Security disability, or what does that process look like?
That's a great question, and one we'd probably need to take offline and go into a little more detail on. But I would imagine it is a very similar process, and you could still proceed both.
All right. Last question, and then we're gonna have to jump. So if anyone has any additional questions, please email us or scan that QR code. Can you review one more time how Social Security credits are earned?
Yes, so Social Security credits are essentially earned as you continue to work and as you pay in via taxes to the Social Security Trust. So one credit essentially is earned per quarter that you work and earn more than $1,810. So each quarter that you earn more than that, you'll earn one credit, 4 credits per year. After 10 years, it doesn't have to be consecutive, just 10 total years of working, then you'll have 40 credits and be fully eligible for Social Security. Now, fully eligible does not mean you'll get the max possible, because they do take 35 years. So if you only have 10 years and a lot of other zeros, then it may reduce your average monthly benefit a little bit.
Okay. I actually, Rocky, wanted to share, and maybe you can share it, around why we recommend that people log into ssa.gov, and that's not just to view your benefit, your monthly benefit.
Absolutely, yeah. So ssa.gov is where you can go create an account, my Social Security account, and you can get a statement, which is what Chad was referring to, of how much you'll receive at every year between 62 and 70. But you'll also be able to see your work history. So you'll be able to see those 35 years laid out in a fancy chart. And then typically they'll send you a statement updating it year to year, so you can keep an eye on what your expected Social Security is and help you plan when to file when you get to retirement age.
Awesome. And for those of you who are wondering, it is depressing when you see how much that you have put into Social Security over your working career. It's kind of a shocking number, I think, for most. I will also say my recommendation is to double check those earnings. It's not common. It's very, very, very remote chance that this happens, but there are some employers that underreport earnings or don't actually pass the Social Security taxes on to the administration. Obviously, that's fraud and they end up eventually getting caught. But I encourage you to review your earnings record on a year-by-year basis, particularly if you work for a smaller employer. Again, not to say that your employer is dishonest or anything, but it's one of those things to double check and make sure everything's correct.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, everybody. Rocky, thank you for the presentation today. It has been a riveting topic that I know all of us love to talk about at parties. If anybody has any questions, please call, email, stop by our office, ring our doorbell, or scan that QR code, whatever you'd like to do to get a hold of us. We would love to talk to you, go over financial planning, investing strategies, retirement planning, and making sure you're on track, whatever it may be. And we want to thank you all for joining us today. And again, if you have any friends, family members, people you meet at the grocery store that have Social Security questions, please send them our way. We are happy to answer those for those folks as well. So thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your afternoon, a good 4th of July, and a great rest of the week.